Imagine trying to build, the most advanced artificial intelligence brain on Earth.
Right.
And to turn it on, to literally give it power, you have to completely bypass Silicon Valley. You ignore massive tech hubs like Singapore or Tokyo,
Yeah?
and instead you just plug the entire system directly into Mount Everest.
It sounds completely wild when you put it like that.
Right. But that is the sheer scale of the geographic and technological pivot we are unpacking for you today.
Exactly.
Because if you're listening to this deep dive, you are always looking for that next massive shift in global infrastructure. And today we are looking at a business plan and a really detailed financial model titled Himalayan Compute.
Yeah, this document has been catching fire recently.
It really has. It was originally sparked by this highly detailed structural proposal mapped out by Pukhar Hamal and Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
And it's important to note, their mission here isn't to build, like, just another app.
No, not at all.
It's a bold proposal to fundamentally transform Nepal, a country we usually just associate with the Himalayas, into literally the Singapore of AI compute.
Which is just a massive claim.
It really is. They are talking about building a geopolitical infrastructure empire powered entirely by hydropower.
But before we really get into the gears of this, I need to give a quick disclaimer for you listening.
Yeah, that's definitely necessary here.
Because this is a macro infrastructure deep dive, the source material leans heavily into global geopolitics.
Right, you can't really separate the two at this scale.
Exactly. The text relies on concepts like U.S.-aligned infrastructure and the strategic decoupling of technology supply chains from China, and it even mentions specific political alignments.
Which can be a bit of a minefield.
Right. So our job today is just to take this business strategy exactly as it is laid out on the page and dissect the mechanics.
We are absolutely not endorsing any political factions or foreign policies here.
Yep. We are impartially reporting on the strategic calculus that this startup is using to pitch multi-billion-dollar infrastructure funds. We're not taking any sides.
We're just following the money and the blueprints.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So let's start with the core thesis here. Why is compute the new oil, and why is Nepal being positioned as the refinery?
Well, it starts with recognizing a massive structural failure in the current tech landscape.
Okay, explain that.
You don't pitch $1 billion solution unless you have identified a bleeding neck problem, right?
Sure.
The text anchors this entire endeavor on the exponential explosion of AI inference demand.
Inference.
Yes, and specifically demand localized in the APAC, Indo-Pacific, and MINE regions.
Right, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, we all know the difference between training a model and running inference on it.
Yeah, but it's worth reiterating.
Training takes, massive clusters working for months to teach the AI, but inference is the actual deployment.
The everyday use.
Exactly. It's the real-time processing when millions of end users are simultaneously pinging an AI copilot to, write an email or generating a video on the fly.
Right. And the business plan highlights that the Asia-Pacific and Middle East regions encompass roughly 3.5 billion people.
Wow.
And over $35 trillion in regional GDP.
That's a massive market.
It's unbelievable. These are mobile-first, hyper-connected populations. The demand for compute there is just staggering.
So compute really is the new oil for these regions.
It is.
Yep.
But what's fascinating here is the physical bottleneck that this demand creates.
A power issue.
Exactly. Compute is the oil, but power is the actual bottleneck. If you look at standard cloud data centers, the ones that have powered the internet for the last 15 years, a typical server rack might draw somewhere between 5 to 10 kilowatts of power.
Okay, 5 to 10.
Right. But a rack packed with high-end AI GPUs, like NVIDIA H100s or the newer Blackwell architecture,
Yeah.
those can pull 40, 60, even over 100 kilowatts per rack.
Geez. That's just a totally different scale.
It is. The density of power required is completely breaking the electrical grids in traditional tech hubs.
Right, because you look at places like Ashburn, Virginia, or Singapore, or Dublin, these cities are literally halting new data center construction.
Because there simply aren't enough electrons on the grid.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how much venture capital you have, you cannot outspend the physical limits of a city's power plant.
Which brings us directly to the core thesis of Himalayan Compute.
Okay, let's unpack this,
Sure.
because this is the big idea, right?
It is. The pitch is to utilize Nepal's largely untapped, massive renewable hydropower resources to build dedicated GPU-optimized AI compute clusters.
It requires a total shift in how we think about infrastructure deployment.
How so?
Well, the old model was building the data center as close to the corporate headquarters or the traditional internet backbone as possible, even if the power was expensive and dirty.
Right, sticking it in the suburbs of major cities.
Exactly. It's like trying to build a heavy industrial refinery right in the middle of a crowded, expensive metropolis.
Which makes no sense when you really think about it.
No. And this Himalayan Compute model says, let's stop moving the power to the factory. Let's build a highly efficient refinery right on top of a massive, untapped, and clean oil well.
That's a really great way to put it.
But here's the friction point I see. While power is the ultimate constraint, internet architecture is still bound by the laws of physics.
The speed of light.
Yes. At a certain point, the speed of light through a fiber optic cable dictates how far your data center can be from the person using the AI. So is the physical location actually that important if the internet connects everyone globally?
What's fascinating here is how the business plan addresses this exact issue. It leans heavily into what they call the proximity advantage.
Okay, proximity to who?
To the users. Remember, we're talking about inference, not training.
Mm-hmm.
Latency matters immensely for AI inference.
Right, because if I'm using an AI voice translator, I can't wait 3 seconds for the server to reply.
Exactly. A delay of just 150 milliseconds can render some applications unusable.
So being in Nepal actually helps with that.
Huge advantage. Nepal isn't isolated. It physically borders some of the most densely populated, tech-hungry regions on Earth.
Oh, right. Geographically, you are looking straight down into the Indo-Gangetic Plain.
Exactly. You have immediate physical adjacency to North India, specifically the Delhi National Capital Region.
Which is massive.
Massive. Plus relatively short fiber hops to Bangladesh, Pakistan, and onward to the Gulf via fiber routes.
So you are capturing the cheap, stranded energy of the mountains, but maintaining ultra-low network latency to literally billions of mobile devices.
That is the core geographical hack of the whole business plan.
That makes total sense on a macro level. But now that we understand why Nepal makes sense generally, we need to look at exactly what this company is selling.
Right, because it's not just a single server room in a mountain.
No, they have a very specific plan. Let's get into the product stack. The business plan details a 4-layered stack, right?
Yes. They referred to this as building a build once, rent forever infrastructure empire.
I love that phrasing. Build once, rent forever.
It's the dream of every infrastructure company. So, layer 1 is the physical ground truth, the AI data center campuses.
Okay.
We touched on the power density earlier, but the text specifically notes these campuses are engineered from the concrete up for liquid and immersion cooling.
Oh, wow. Not air cooling.
No, air is a remarkably inefficient conductor of heat. When you have a rack of GPUs generating the thermal output of an industrial oven, standard air conditioning simply fails.
So they literally dunk the servers in liquid.
Literally, it's called immersion cooling. The servers are submerged in a specialized non-conductive dielectric fluid.
That sounds crazy, but also kind of brilliant.
It transfers heat exponentially faster.
Yeah.
By designing the facilities modularly around this liquid cooling requirement, they can deploy containerized compute clusters rapidly.
So layer 1 is the actual physical shell, the power routing, the cooling systems. What's layer 2?
Layer 2 sits right on top. Compute as a service, or CLS.
Okay, class.
Renting a concrete shell doesn't help a fast-moving AI startup. They need access to the processing power itself.
Right, they don't want to buy their own servers.
Exactly. Buying an NVIDIA cluster outright requires hundreds of millions of dollars of upfront capital. By offering highly specialized GPU compute on a rental basis, Himalayan Compute transforms that massive CapEx burden into a manageable operational expense.
It sounds a lot like AWS.
It is similar to AWS, but hyper-specialized strictly for AI inference and fine-tuning.
Okay, so that's layer 2. What about layer 3?
Layer 3 is where the geopolitics really starts bleeding into the product design. It's the sovereign AI zones.
Sovereign AI zones. That sounds very intense.
It is. The business plan isn't just selling to startups. They are proposing physically walled-off, dedicated secure clusters for governments.
Oh, wow. So like a Nepal AI zone or an India AI zone.
Exactly, or GCC AI zone for the Gulf countries. The demand for data sovereignty is completely reshaping cloud architecture right now.
Because governments don't want their sensitive data on shared servers.
Right. They have realized that if their national healthcare algorithms or defense logistics are processed on servers located in foreign jurisdictions, They are vulnerable to foreign laws.
So they want the raw computational power, but with strict physical isolation.
Precisely. And layer 3 offers that. Then finally, we have layer 4, the AI operations workforce layer.
Which makes sense. You can't just drop $1 billion of high-voltage, liquid-cooled silicon into the mountains and expect it to run itself.
Not at all. They are outlining a massive initiative to train a specialized Nepali workforce to operate these GPUs and cooling systems,
It creates a localized talent ecosystem.
which is critical for long-term sustainability.
Mm.
If you rely entirely on expensive imported talent to maintain the data centers, your operating margins will just collapse.
Okay, so looking at this four-layer stack, the cooling, the rental model, the secure zones, the workforce, I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Wait, why wouldn't massive giants like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud just crush a startup trying to do this?
It's the obvious question, right?
Right. It really is. These hyperscalers have practically infinite balance sheets. Why can't they just replicate this and squash Himalayan Compute?
The strategy to counter the hyperscalers is arguably the most compelling part of the document. Their competitive wedge isn't trying to beat AWS globally.
Okay.
Their distinct advantage is being the absolute cheapest AI compute node specifically for Indo-Pacific workloads.
So it's purely a cost play.
It's geographic arbitrage powered entirely by renewable energy. Competitors like AWS are dominant, but they are very expensive.
Right.
Oracle is cheaper but smaller. CoreWeave is heavily US-centric. Himalayan Compute is wedging into the market by leveraging an energy cost profile that the trillion-dollar companies physically cannot replicate in their existing Asian data centers.
Ah, I see. So if you are a massive Indian telecom rolling out an AI assistant, your primary concern is the unit cost per compute cycle.
Exactly. And if Himalayan Compute can offer that at a fraction of the cost of an AWS zone in Mumbai, simply because the mountain electricity powering it is cheaper.
The economic gravitational pull becomes irresistible. But having a cheaper product isn't enough to stop massive copycats from neighboring countries. I mean, someone else could just find a river and build a data center, right? You need structural defense mechanisms.
You do. If you are aiming for $1 billion valuation, you need deep structural moats.
So let's talk about deepening the moat. The document outlines what they call unicorn moats, right?
Yes. The expert breaks down 6 specific moats designed to make this model nearly impossible to copy.
Let's hear them.
Number 1, 15 to 25-year locked power purchase agreements, or PPAs, for the hydropower.
Oh, that's huge.
It is. By negotiating a PPA directly with the hydropower operators before the facility is even built, they transform a volatile variable cost into a fixed rate for a generation.
So if a competitor tries to enter 5 years later, the best power is already legally locked up.
Exactly. Moat number 2, first mover permits and a land bank established directly adjacent to the hydropower substations.
Right, to minimize transmission loss.
You capture the maximum efficiency of the power generated. Moat number 3, negotiated high bandwidth fiber links to India.
Because you need the digital highways to move the data.
Exactly. Moat number 4, GPU supply contracts. They plan to partner deeply with the NVIDIA and AMD ecosystems early on.
Which is tough right now, but necessary.
Moat number 5 is that layer 4 we discussed, the dedicated talent pipeline via the Nepal AI Infrastructure Academy.
Okay, and the 6th?
The 6th moat is political alignment and trust.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
It is.
Because the world decoupling from China creates a very unique opening here.
It's a massive geopolitical tailwind.
Right. U.S. companies want friendly compute zones in Asia, and Nepal is positioned in the text as a trusted neutral geography but aligned infrastructure.
Yes.
But wait, let me ask you to clarify something, because this feels like a potential contradiction.
Okay, what is it?
How can a company market itself as a trusted neutral compute zone while simultaneously selling U.S.-aligned compute zones? If you align with the U.S., aren't you losing your neutrality?
It sounds contradictory until you look at the synthesis in the text. The business targets anchor contracts across very specific phased ecosystems.
Phased how?
Well, phase 1 targets U.S. flagships. We're talking OpenAI or Anthropic partners, maybe U.S. defense contractors.
Okay, so that's the U.S.-aligned part.
Right. But then phase 2 pivots to target Indian enterprises, companies like Reliance Jio or Tata.
Got it.
And phase 3 opens up to Gulf sovereign AI initiatives aligned with UAE or Saudi Vision 2030.
Ah, I see.
So the neutrality of Nepal allows it to host all these distinct global players simultaneously. You can have a U.S.-aligned server rack right next to a Gulf sovereign AI zone.
Because the host country itself doesn't have the baggage of superpower rivalry.
Exactly. It's the Switzerland model applied to data centers.
That makes a lot of sense. But securing these global giants requires a flawless execution timeline.
It does. Theory is easy, concrete is hard.
Right. So let's look at the exact 5-year roadmap designed to hit a billion-dollar valuation.
The document outlines a very rigid roadmap. And the most important thing to grasp here is the single milestone metric they use.
Which is?
Megawatts deployed under contract.
Not active users or app downloads.
No. In heavy infrastructure, the singular metric that drives value is how many megawatts you have built and leased out.
Okay.
If you hit 100 megawatts with long-term contracts and 70% utilization, you are mathematically on a unicorn trajectory.
Let's break this down year by year. What happens in year 1?
Year 1 is the foundation phase. The objective is to raise $50 to $150 million.
Which is a huge seed round.
It is, but they need to build phase 1, which is a 10 to 30 megawatt cluster. The target revenue for year 1 is just $10 to $30 million.
So they're just proving the concept works. What about year 2?
Year 2 is expanding to India. They aim to have 50 megawatts deployed, and the target is $50 million in annual recurring revenue, or ARR.
That's a rapid scale up.
It accelerates in year 3. This is the regional hub phase. They aim for 150 megawatts deployed.
Wow, tripling it.
Yes. This is when they add the sovereign AI zones and secure the Gulf contracts. Target ARR is $150 to $250 million.
Okay, year 4.
Year 4 is the AI Singapore phase, 300 megawatts plus. They plan to partner with a major cloud vendor here. Target ARR hits $400 million.
And finally, year 5.
Year 5 is the destination, an IPO-ready infrastructure unicorn, a planned pipeline of over 500 megawatts, generating $700 million to $1 billion in ARR.
This roadmap is funny. It really reminds me of city planning.
How so?
Well, you don't build a whole city all at once, right?
No, that would be impossible.
You build the power grid first, then you attract an anchor tenant, like a massive factory. And once that factory is there and the power works, the rest of the city modularly grows around it.
That is the perfect analogy. Once that first anchor tenant is locked in, the risk profile drops and the ecosystem scales around it.
But building an infrastructure empire is incredibly capital intensive.
Very.
You can't just fund a 500 megawatt data city with a standard Silicon Valley app startup seed round.
No, you definitely cannot. Which brings us to the financial modeling. We need to follow the money.
Yes, let's unpack this investor-grade financial model because this is where the numbers get dizzying.
They really do.
Yeah.
The document dives deep into the heavy CapEx reality. Capital expenditure is projected at $8 million per IT megawatt.
$8 million for a single megawatt.
Yes. So to reach 500 megawatts by year 5, the total CapEx is a staggering $4 billion.
$4 billion? How does a startup possibly raise $4 billion?
It's a great question. You definitely don't raise it all in venture capital.
Because the founders would be diluted down to nothing.
Exactly. The text details a hybrid structure. Phase 1 requires VC equity that's around 20% of the total stack, roughly $800 million over 5 years.
Okay, so that covers the high-risk early stages.
Right. But once the anchor contracts are signed, the business shifts to project finance and debt.
Ah, debt.
Yes. The remaining 80%, or $3.2 billion, comes from infrastructure funds, export credit agencies, and World Bank-style financing.
Because once you have a signed 10-year contract from a giant corporation, you can take that to a bank.
Exactly. The contract acts as the guarantee. This structure prevents massive founder dilution.
That makes sense. But taking on $3 billion in debt only works if the margins are amazing. Let's look at the revenue and margin magic here.
The unit economics are really strong. The blended revenue per megawatt at full utilization is estimated at $2.2 million annually.
Okay. And what about the costs?
This is the hydropower secret weapon. Power costs are estimated at a highly competitive 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour.
Wow.
And about 4.5 cents delivered to the facility.
And what are competitors paying?
Competitors in traditional hubs are paying anywhere from 8 to 12 cents per kilowatt hour.
So they are paying less than half for their absolute biggest expense.
Exactly. This structural advantage allows gross margins to scale from 35% in year 1 to an incredible 62% by year 5.
A 62% gross margin on physical infrastructure is wild.
It really is. By year 5, generating an estimated $880 million in revenue, the projected EBITDA is $431 million.
So what does this all mean in terms of valuation?
Well, let's do the math.
Right. If you value this company at, say, 20 times EBITDA or even 10 times revenue in year 5, you're looking at an $8.6 to $8.8 billion valuation.
A near decacorn.
It is so rare to see a startup pitch with infrastructure payback periods mapped out so precisely over 5 to 8 years.
It's a very robust financial model.
However, spreadsheets are perfectly obedient.
They are. You drag the cell down and you're a billionaire.
Exactly. But reality is messy. What happens when things go wrong? We need to look at mitigating macro risks in the Himalayas.
Yes, we have to address the elephant in the room.
Because any investor reading this pitch deck will immediately look for the catch.
The sources actually identify 5 major risks.
Let's go through them methodically. What is risk number 1?
Risk number 1 is political instability.
Right. Nepal has had some government turnover.
Yes, and the solution proposed here is creating a legally protected AI special economic zone.
Okay, so a ring-fenced jurisdiction.
Exactly, backed by international arbitration. Risk number 2 is connectivity bottlenecks.
Because if a landslide takes out your fiber cable, you're dead in the water.
Right. The solution is investing heavily and early in fiber redundancy to India, multiple geographic paths.
Makes perfect sense. Risk number 3.
GPU supply shortage.
Getting chips is hard right now.
Very hard. The solution is securing long-term diversified supply agreements and using anchor clients to get priority.
Okay, risk 4.
The perception issue. The idea that Nepal isn't stable enough for this.
How do they overcome that bias?
But leveraging a global board of directors, U.S. credibility, and tapping into the Harvard and MIT networks.
Borrowed credibility. I like it. And the 5th risk?
India's own cheaper clusters.
Yeah, I wanted to push back on this. The India risk.
What's your thought?
If India has immense resources and capital, why couldn't a massive Indian conglomerate just build this on their side of the border? Why do they need Nepal?
The text is very clear on this. The structural advantage is the geography combined with the specific hydropower profile.
Because India's grid is mostly coal.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
about being an energy-to-compute exporter, capturing carbon advantages that other regions simply cannot match.
Ah, so it's ESG compliance.
Yes, they are capturing carbon advantages that mainland grids just don't have.
That is brilliant. Okay, so bringing this all together, let's look at the ultimate pitch, the win-win-win philosophy.
The pitch deck summary really hammers this home.
It's all about converting Asia's most underpriced strategic asset renewable hydropower into intelligence.
Yes, the text breaks down a trilateral benefit, a win-win-win.
Let's hear the wins.
First, it's a massive win for Nepal.
How so?
Billions in export revenue, massive job creation, and global strategic relevance. Hydropower effectively becomes Nepal's oil.
Okay, second win.
A win for the U.S. and Western ecosystems. It establishes a trusted, alternative compute base in Asia that strengthens Indo-Pacific alignment.
Got it. And the third win?
A win for the world. Cheaper compute, decentralized infrastructure, and clean energy-driven AI growth.
It is just an incredible vision. It completely reframes the narrative of a developing nation.
It really does.
Moving from traditional, labor or tourism industries directly into serving the most advanced technological boom in human history.
It leapfrogs the industrial era entirely.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before we go, we want to leave you with a final thought.
Yeah, connecting the sources to a broader question for you to ponder.
Exactly. If a nation can literally bottle its natural geography like a mountain river and export it globally as artificial intelligence,
It really makes you wonder.
what other underutilized natural resources around the world are waiting to be converted into the invisible infrastructure of tomorrow?
There have to be other geographical hacks out there.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Himalayan Compute business plan.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Keep looking for the hidden aha moments in your own reading, because the next massive shift might just be hiding in plain sight.